This is Louie Zumbaugh with Rush Hour Ag. Leave your message after the tone.
Hey, Louie, it's Elliott Henderson. Can't wait to tell you about
rolling down the back road, truth riding with the dust, talking agriculture policy with people you can trust. From the field to the Capitol, we're breaking it down. Real talk, real issues from a real farm town. Every hour's rush hour when the work won't wait, so we're cutting through the noise and setting things straight.
What's your rush today, Elliott?
Welcome, listeners, to the Rush Hour Ag Podcast. Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Elliott Henderson.
And I'm your host, Louie Zumbaugh. Today on the podcast, we got a great guest. It's Representative Norlin Mommsen from the DeWitt area, correct?
Yes, sir.
And
District 70, right?
Yes, that's correct.
they all got different numbers. What, last year?
Yep.
Yeah.
We'll start a new session after redistricting.
I was fortunate enough to serve with Norlin when I was there. And tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll dive into the Grain Indemnity Fund.
Well, actually, I'm a farmer when I'm not out here. Raise some corn and beans, but enjoy feeding cattle more than I do raising corn and beans. So, and right now the cattle business is lots of fun, but expensive as feeders are and everything. So, but that's kind of what I enjoy the most is actually the farming, but got involved with, the legislature, and I've enjoyed that too. A lot of great people like Louie and other people out there. Most of the people are there for the right reason.
I agree.
So how many head do you feed, or
Right now we're down, but I can have around 400 head on feed at a time, and I a lot of times do some custom feeding too, and along with our own. Actually, we've gotten into butchering and selling direct now too, so that's my son's deal. So
yeah, he started that about 4 or 5 years ago.
He got meddling with it, so he calls it Mommsen and Sons, but it's not me. It's him, and he's got 4 little boys, so They left me out of the. Everybody thinks it's Mommsen, me and
him,
and him, but no, it's him and his. So
yeah. So let's dive right into the Grain Indemnity Fund. And maybe to start with, you could kind of explain what it is and then where it's going.
Well, the Grain Indemnity Fund is a fund that was created in the 80s, basically to help farmers that stored grain at their local elevators and sold grain through your local elevators. There was a lot of failures back in the 80s due to some, some crazy schemes, marketing schemes that were put together, which caused failures, which basically at the end of the day cost farmers a lot of money. And it's one of those issues that, and I look at it, depends what hat I have on. There's different proposals out there concerning the Grain Indemnity Fund, and I tell people, because a lot of people think I should be at a different place than I am in regards to the fund itself, and I say, yeah, if I'm home with my seed corn cap on, you're damn right, I would prefer to have some of my risky marketing decisions covered or insured by somebody else. Makes sense.
Sure.
But out in the legislature, you get a better a look at the bigger picture, and when you look at the risk involved or the liability to the total fund, which different aspects of what some people want covered by the fund, we can't have enough money there with the size of some of these large elevators to cover some of these risks. So that is part of the picture you got to look at. Because I think at the end of the day, if I as a farmer think there is a fund in the state has that'll cover basically my check for my elevator, and at the end of the day, if I have got to basically exercise that fund, and someone says, well, there's not enough money there, but don't worry, in 4 or 5 years we'll be able to pay it. I don't know. Usually when I sell grain or sell cattle, a lot of times I have some bills to pay today and not 4 or 5 years from now. So I think it'd be a worse scenario if I promised you something and I couldn't deliver, then basically say, no, we're only going to cover this much, and on the rest of this, you're on your own. So at least you'd know where the boundary lines were. And that's kind of where I stand, or kind of how I've looked at the whole issue.
So like today, they want to add credit sale contracts and price deferred, by adding those products to this coverage, essentially, the amount of money this thing is going to take is billions of dollars, really, to back this thing.
That's correct. Some of the stuff I have seen concerning simply defer pay, and from a small elevator in eastern Iowa that has just 2 locations, just prior to the first of the year, they had $9.4 million in defer pay. And this is a small 2-location elevator. Can you imagine what one of these huge co-ops have on defer pay just prior to the first of the year? And that's kind of the big, we want to say where the big rub is on a lot of this is that defer pay part. And myself personally, I'm adamant against defer pay. Defer pay is a unsecured loan that a farmer is giving to an elevator. And I have a problem with asking my neighbors to secure or back an unsecured loan I'm giving to somebody else, because just walk into your bank and ask for an unsecured loan for the amount of money some of those checks are that are paid out January 2nd. And after he gets done laughing at you, he'll kick your ass out.
Well, I look at this too. It's a contract. It's a sale on contract. So it's not a dispute about possession of bushels at this point. It's a dispute about dollars owed.
Mm-hmm.
And why are we asking the indemnity fund to remedy that when we already have a legal system, the civil court system that settles contract dispute?
Can't disagree with you. And if you go back to the original, in the 80s, credit sales were part of the original indemnity fund. And after a couple years, it was basically the elevators that asked for it to be removed due to some of the risky behavior that was going on amongst operators, because they would create some type of a marketing scheme or whatever. And it was a kind of a, don't worry, because if this goes south, the indemnity fund will cover you. And so basically to help protect themselves, you talk to some of the what do you want to say, some of the older elevator operators, they are adamant that do not allow credit sales involved. And
So let's back up just a little bit. And so there's 2 versions, correct?
That's correct.
The House has a version and the Senate. Can you tell us what each version is?
basically, the Senate version covers credit sales. Under present code, a credit sale includes basically price later contracts and also defer pay.
So everything.
Everything. Basically, if it's not a cash sale where you sell it and the elevator writes you out a check within so many days, it's considered a credit sale under today's code. And what the House does, which we were, Representative Sexton and myself were tasked with trying to come up with a compromise because if you had talked to me a year ago and I was sitting here, I'd have been an adamant hell no on any type of credit sale. And so basically, and we had the other one where we included everything plus the kitchen sink.
Right.
And so it was asked, could you please sit down between the different groups and come up with a compromise? So that's what we did. And so what we did was redefined credit sales. So basically a credit sale is any time the price has yet to be determined. So as long as the price had not been determined on whether it be corn or beans or potentially wheat, it was still a credit sale and it's still a marketing decision, because there's some people that want.
So that would be covered, or would
that would be covered under the House. As long as the price is yet to be determined, we felt it was a marketing. It was still in that area of marketing, but once the price is determined, that's when it became an unsecured loan. Because if you could walk away with the check and you as a producer say, no, I'd rather have it January 2nd so Uncle Sam doesn't get it this year, then that is a decision the producer made, and it was not a marketing decision, it was a tax decision.
So can you clarify this for me? If you're not determining the price, what's the difference in just keeping it in storage?
Well, you've given up possession. You've got I'm trying to think of all the different kind of schemes out there.
Essentially, if you agree to this contract, you're giving up possession of it, and you've stopped the meter running on your storage.
But you have some things like, I think they call them price later contracts,
Right.
and hedge to arrive, and things like that, where you've given up possession, but you have not yet determined the price. Now, kicker, what we put in there in the house side was we took the premise that the system basically has worked. The present system has worked. So we wanted to do as little as possible to alter the present system. So we wanted to keep the 1/4 cent bushel the same. And so when you look at a credit sale, in the terms of insurance, it is a higher risk. So if it was an insurance policy, they would charge you more of a premium due to the risk.
Yep.
And we wanted to keep the 1/4 cent the same. And right now, whether it be a grain in deposit or grain in the silo at the storage, or a cash sale, they pay out at 90%. What we did was took some ideas from the insurance industry and basically took credit sales only pay out at 70%, and that was our way of offsetting that additional risk to the fund. And that way we didn't have to worry about raising the premium because you got paid less.
Premium is saying just get less coverage.
Right. And that's kind of offsetting the risk on the payment side, not on the paying, what am I trying to say? And that's how we, but then we also have in ours that the grain in deposit and let's say you got only X amount of dollars in the fund. And if one of these large co-ops go down, whether, we raise the limits 2 to 8 and a max of 16. If that was not enough to cover the losses, cash sale and deposits got first priority, and then credit sales had to, if they ran out of money, they were the ones that waited. Was kind of how we still wanted to make the guys that basically just have a bad check whole first, because if you have a hedge to arrive or price later, you're gambling a little bit, so you need to accept some of that risk for that gamble.
It just seems a little bit like we're sending the Titanic out to sea, and we all know how that ended up.
Well, like I said, I was asked to come up with a compromise. Yeah. So like I said, I tried, and if you look, most of the groups, like I said, originally the co-op lobby or the elevator lobby, and those people were against it, and they did come on board.
Against the House bill?
Right. They didn't want anything to do credit sales, but we said, look, you're paying 70%.
Okay, so they weren't for either bill.
Originally, they didn't want anything to do with credit sales.
Right, okay.
And so by what we came up with, we brought them, but one of these things, we don't like it, but we'll live with it.
Right.
But we also added a piece, if you read into the code, to become a grain dealer, there's 2 ways of doing it. You can do an unqualified audit, or you can just bring your own paperwork in and post, I think, $100,000 bond. And you can start buying and selling grain. And the elevators, and an unqualified audit costs more because a third party comes in and basically counts everything, looks at everything, and verifies it's there, versus you just bringing your paperwork in and say, I've got X. Which originally the agribusiness was against, because they have in their association some of the smaller grain dealers, but then they came on board with that. They agreed with that. They would agree to that. So everybody has to do an unqualified audit once a year. So hopefully we have a better look at all the, a real thorough look at the business model.
So you're doing away with the $100,000 bond.
Yep. So that is one of the ways we're trying to hopefully basically stop any problems, is by a better look and
knowing they're going to go defunct before they go defunct.
Yep. And if the department feels someone's at risk, there's red flags, see, then they ask for more paperwork during the year.
We'll go to a monthly audit.
And then they can shut them off if they feel. Then the first thing you get cut off of is credit sales if you get shaky. So we tried to put some, like you said, we could just well go to Vegas. I mean, because it's that risky in theory. I mean,
We had the conversation about, Louie selling his car to me on contract, and then I burned the car down. Why are you paying your premiums to cover Louie's car that he doesn't own anymore?
I was originally for everything in the kitchen sink. I still would like to be. I'm not gonna lie.
Well, no, like I said, I
like
was
to
too.
be.
If I'm home and I'm not up to legislature,
Right.
You're damn right.
My big concern, though, after I was told this by a couple people, was so farmers are the only ones that pay this in. Active
No.
farmers. No, that's
The
not true?
elevators pay into on storage.
Okay,
They pay in.
but that's still
But over the years, and one of the misnomers was if you had done a credit sale or defer pay, which technically you didn't pay into the indemnity fund. So I've heard from people, well, I've been paying in for that. I should get coverage. If you've been taking a deferred pay check, you do not pay into the indemnity fund on that. So you're not paying a premium on that money. And that's
ever.
nope. It's only that cash sale. The first time it's sold at a cash sale. So,
But when you're deferring payment, it is a cash sale. You're just saying you don't want the check yet.
right.
So you're
But
still paying. You're still paying into it.
Have you read the print on that form that the elevator makes you sign?
Well, I'd hate to say I did because I haven't, but
Because in bold black print, it says on there at some point that this transaction is not covered by the Grain Indemnity Fund.
that's fine. I get that you're saying
Right.
it's not covered, but it doesn't mean you didn't pay in.
But you didn't pay in either because
Yeah,
they don't
no
assess
coverage.
you when they pay you.
You're not paying for
Really?
any coverage.
You're not paying for any coverage.
Okay.
So you can't say I paid for a coverage and you're refusing to give it to me. And we
Okay.
kept that same in the House bill, that the credit sale part we included now in that 1/4 cent, but not the deferred pay part.
So like these deferred pays, I mean, I'm hearing rumors that there's a lot of like deferred pays sitting out there for multiple years.
Yep.
What can you share about that?
No, there's, like I said, in another elevator in our area, I know there's an elevator operator told them they have a guy that has grain sitting there for a couple of years. Won't take the check. They say,
But it's sold,
it's sold.
so it's not sitting there.
He's not paying storage on it. He's not.
right.
He's just not.
But the grain's not there.
The grain's not there.
physically gone. You just don't take check.
Yeah, the elevator doesn't have to include that on their sheets because in their books he's
They have possession. They own it
yep, and he's taking defer pay.
for tax reasons.
And they've
Yep.
got a check written out to him. He just never.
Well, they haven't written a check. He's filled out the form that says
He's got an IOU.
he's got an IOU from the elevator.
Yeah,
Yeah,
all right.
there's some.
Well, my big concern, I'm still liking the kitchen sink. I'm only wearing my farmer hat, so I don't have to have anymore. My farmer hat, my podcast hat. The thing I found amazing, I know this happens, is that so farmers pay this in, and what do you suspect what's the amount you think this will get up to? 5 million, 6 million?
It's already at 8. It's going to shut off this year if we don't do anything. Right now, it's 8 on top of 8, a bottom of 3 in present code, and it'll shut off this year. So if we don't do anything, this grain that you sell probably in October, you won't be assessed a fee, unless we change something. But
So there's $8 million sitting in it,
right, I think somewhere between 6 and 8 right now.
and you want to make it higher? Is that what you're?
Well, when we added
I'm
the
going somewhere
credit
with
sales,
Yep.
we thought we needed a little more money.
Okay. But my problem is why I'm no longer for the kitchen sink is that say you made this and was going to do everything and get it up to 15 million or 20 million or take your number. My fear is that a future legislators could scoop that money for something completely different. And that could happen, correct?
No, and that's correct. There's no way of protecting it. And that's been our fear too. I've been given an estimate it'll take between $50 and $100 million in a fund to cover defer pay.
And that would be too big a temp.
That would be the biggest target you ever saw on the back of something. And I can see a different group of legislators get
Yep.
in there and go, let's take water quality and go, we got to do something about water quality, and we're not coming up with enough money. But here's a fund that's been paid in by producers from the sale of their corn and beans, which is contributing to the water quality issue. So why don't we use that money to help fix the problem that they are causing? I could write the script today
Sure.
and put it in an envelope, and someday somebody will open it up and read it.
Yeah.
And that's the fear of going.
Not only will they read it, they will say, former Representative Mommsen come up with this idea.
That's right.
But
He gave us the idea.
Yeah, boy. He had such insight on how this could all
But
work
no,
out.
if you get it too big, the target gets bigger and the scoop gets larger.
Well, and that
Yeah.
150 million, if these credit sale contracts and deferred payments are really as big as we think they are, and it's potentially billions of dollars, 150 million won't even cover
No.
70%. I mean, you're talking $1 billion fund to cover 70%
Yeah.
of potential, and that'll never
At least initially, and then they sell all the assets of the elevator and hopefully get it back. But what is interesting, and I should have brought it along and I didn't. If you look at, and I was given from an elevator a chart of their credit sales and defer pay, and then we got from the Department of Agriculture the dates over the years when elevators have gone broke.
Okay.
The highest credit sale limits are basically October through the 1st of January. And guess when the most elevator failures have taken
Same
place?
time frame.
Same time frame.
Sure.
Right. They lay right on top of each other. So yeah, it's history would,
So do you feel the House version will be what passes in the end?
I hope so. Well, and I'm biased because I helped develop it and
Sure.
did the work on it, and we think we build enough safeguards in it to try and alleviate. Because the worst thing, like I said, when at the beginning, the worst thing I would ever hate to have happen if somebody I knew had to wait, and I had something to do with it.
Sure. Does IDALS favor one over the other, or they're staying neutral, just
They're-
want something, or?
They're basically staying neutral.
Sure.
But there was a piece they wanted, and they wanted also basically a mechanism for specialty crops, maybe organic corn
Okay.
or soybeans or non-GMO, and the price is higher. And in discussions with them, I said, that's great, but when there's a failure and you got a pile of non-GMO beans here, how are we going to determine a price? I said, show me your price discovery. And they looked at me and go, we can't. There's no mechanism. So what we did in the bill, we still cover them, but everything's covered as number yellow 2 corn
Right.
and beans, or because of that price discovery. Because, all of us here, if the elevator in town, I think there's an elevator in town, went broke, we could basically come up with what the price of corn is today and soybeans is today. But we could not come up with the price of organic or non-GMO.
Well, not only that, if you did that, it would be much like your credit sales. You'd be asking me to help pay for something that
Yep.
somebody else has chosen to do. It'd be kind of the same type of thing.
You're correct. And that's
So I
Think
can
of
totally
that. This
understand that.
indemnity fund is it's a mechanism to settle possession disputes. And I think like the feeders, this is a mechanism to get guys grain quickly if they need their grain when there's a dispute over the possession of the grain.
try and get money to them. And
Or the grain.
right.
So they can replenish that stock of grain that they need to have if they're feeding livestock, for example. This was a great tool to do that. But there's no reason to settle the dispute on bushels for contract sales. They've already sold it. They've already agreed to sell it and give up the possession of it. I don't see the real reason to satisfy the possession for grain that was already sold.
Well, I guess we're all very disagreeing on some of that, but at the end of the day, there's not enough money available to do everything.
That's correct.
And my biggest fear would be the scooping part, because I know it would happen.
Oh yeah, and
without a doubt.
and to answer your question is, that's the politics of this. I mean, like I said, I have been an adamant hell no. I have been an adamant hell no. And like I said, but okay, what can I do? Because we do have a group of people that want to cover it, which have valid concerns also. And so how do we try and find a middle ground? And that's like I said, that's what Representative Sachs and I tried to do, and tried to also put in safeguards with the unqualified audits, the 70% covering organic or specialty crops as number 1 and 2. Because if you can't come up with if you have some uncertainty, the only person that makes money in that deal is an attorney, and we want to keep as many as possible out of it. Right. And so that's just something we talked about and looked at, that, if you don't have a clue, it's going to be decided in the courts.
So this has been a funny thing that I've been pretty passionate about for the last year, where the loud voices that are really advocating for this, when you sit down and have the conversation with them about it, they really don't know why they're asking for this. And I'm kind of curious what your thoughts or input would be on, how this thing got to where it is and it didn't just get squashed a year or two ago. Basically,
there's a major farm organization that their members, this is their policy.
That's why it is.
And that's one of the reasons, basically it hasn't been passed yet, because you have the Senate bill, which basically reflects that policy. Mm-hmm. And I'll take the House one, which is a compromise, which buy-in from also the other farm organizations.
And there are other farm organizations that are opposed to both of these bills, but they just don't seem like they're very vocal about it.
Well, and some would prefer, and they prefer not to do it, but if we got to take something, that then we prefer yours over that.
Yep.
And it's
And it's supposed to be about compromise.
Yeah. And that's, like I said, I was a year ago when we were leaving session, I was asked, knowing where I stood, but can you come up with something? And that was, okay, I will put my,
I know for
my stuff aside and see where a middle road or a road that wiggles through. And like I said, we worked with all the different organizations, which, and like I said, we got to where, well, we prefer not, but we can live with it type of an attitude, which is the art of the compromise. Nobody's happy.
I know for a fact, Norlin, that you spend a lot of time on the bills that you're involved in. So I have no doubt that you've done that with this. I know last year, outside of session, we were both at a friend's house, and I kind of started chewing on you a little bit about not being about the eminent domain stuff, and you set me straight on what was actually in the bill. And I should have known from being there that you should always read the bills first. So I know sometimes when you see your representative or senators not voting the way you think you should, always read the bill for yourself so you understand what they're not voting on, because you certainly set me straight that how I thought that was going to work and what was actually going on was not the same thing. I agreed with you completely when you got done telling me that. So I have complete confidence that you've done your homework on this and done a good job. And I told you this would be the only thing we talk about today because we only have so much time.
Well,
is there anything else going on that you could briefly hit on or want to on anything else that's going on at the State House?
Well, I know one of the big things when we went into the session, is the property tax thing. And it's looking, in my opinion, it's looking like nothing's going to happen this year. Which, in a way, I don't know. Like I said, it could be happening now while I'm sitting here, but it seems like a proposal comes up, and which when you get something sees the light, and the unintended consequences come out, which is good, and that's why I've always said, people get upset at the system there, and I don't know what you think, Louie, but the longer I've been there, I've been a true believer in the system works. You just got to let it, and sometimes it's ugly. And sometimes, but hopefully at the end of the day, the right people stand up at the right time and say, this is bad and it needs to stop, or we need to go this way. But you need that, we don't want to say sometimes that holler and screaming and discontent to actually vet it. And like I said, the system works. And like I said, once in a while, it doesn't quite work like, but overall, I really, like I said, the system, If I could tell something to anybody that wonders about the Capitol, just and usually, when I go to forums and most people, when they read about something in the Des Moines Register, they lose their mind. And when a bill gets introduced and it's like, oh my God, who thought of that crazy idea? Well, you can think of any crazy idea you want and introduce it. Nobody can stop you.
Right.
But you hope the system works and shuts it down before it gets too far. And
I'll always remember, and I don't remember what the bill was about, but it was a tax bill. And we were both there, and it was in debate, but it was a strike after. So it had a title, and then it was strike after that. So the original bill did one thing. The strike after changed the whole bill. And I remember we sat there for a night, and about 2 hours in, Dustin Haidt finally spoke up that to start with, out of this 2-hour talk, nobody's ever mentioned the taxpayer. And the second thing he brought up was that everything that you've talked about and disagreed with was in the bill that was former and isn't even in the new bill.
right.
Remember that night?
Yep, I do.
And it went quite a while until that Dustin finally got up and spoke about those things. And then actually, yeah, they spent 2 hours talking about something that was non-existent because it was a strike after. But well, Norlin, I want to thank you for coming out to Rush Hour Ag. We're a new podcast that we're hoping to get off the ground. We haven't got it off the ground, and you're one of our first guests. And we sure thank you for driving down up to Slater to talk with us. And it's been a pleasure working with you in the past, and look forward to having you again.
Yep, no problem.
Thanks, Norlin.
Yep, and we hope everybody else rushes back for the next episode. Thank you.